Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Michael Landon is one of the American actors with a prolific career on television, but in the world he is remembered above all for giving life to Charles Ingalls, the patriarch of the series, the Ingalls family. The American artist also led a highly commented sentimental life, especially for having married 3 times with different partners. Why Michael Landon's mother was his biggest source of stress. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Iconic actor Michael Landon was a star, popular for several roles, including his appearances on Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, and Highway to Heaven. Landon donned several hats in his career as an actor, producer, writer, and director. Throughout his career, he effortlessly stood out with his good looks and luscious locks. The actor was proud of the way he looked and was always comfortable in front of the camera, gladly appearing on screen shirtless without batting an eye. He was also a fun co-star to be around and knew how to amuse his colleagues with a bunch of jokes or interesting anecdotes. However, underneath the jovial appearance there was a lot more to Michael Landon's life than most people knew. Here's a glimpse into the tragic life and death of one of America's most memorable actors. Photos of him cavorting with his family out on his 10-acre ranch in Malibu say it all. Michael Landon is the picture-perfect husband and dad. After 14 years of Bonanza, 8 with Little House on the Prairie, and now the promise of several seasons with his new one, Highway to Heaven, it's tough to imagine Landon as anything but the ultimate Mr. Nice Guy, which is of course an intolerable state of affairs. But Michael Landon, who starred in wholesome family dramas throughout his 5-decade television career before his death in 1991, didn't always find that warmth in his own home. On many occasions, actors can change for the worst after entering the Hollywood spotlight, but Michael Landon's hardships began well before that, when he was just a kid who should have been enjoying childhood. Too many people can relate to tales of a harsh upbringing. Landon's childhood was nothing short of nightmarish. When he wasn't fending for himself, he was taking care of his mother, who was actually his biggest source of stress. For all the turmoil Landon would have wanted to escape as a kid, it followed him into adulthood. As Charles Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie, he became America's favourite father, a classical, strong, faithful man others could aspire to. But outside of that life, Landon walked a tenuous line of self-destruction and cheating. All the while, he showed obvious care for his peers. He harboured a lot of positive and negative traits and habits that can be hard to reconcile. But that just makes this famous departed actor all the more remarkable, because he's so relatable in many ways. As Lev Tolstoy wrote, happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. At first, Michael Landon's childhood setup sounds like the stuff of dreams. He was born Eugene Morris Horowitz to Jewish and Catholic parents in 1936. His dad struggled as a movie publicist, while his mum was an actress who harboured suicidal thoughts. Landon's parents constantly fought with each other. Crumbling under the pressure, Landon, as explained, he used to wet his bed, and his mum would humiliate him by hanging the bedsheet to dry outside. While his friends could walk calmly home from school, Landon had to sprint. That's because Peggy would take the wet sheets and hang them outside Landon's window so everyone could see. Eventually young Landon had to get crafty and switch out the wet bed sheets so there would be nothing to display and humiliate him with. Landon's bedwetting continued to the age of 12 because of all this stress. Their marriage was unhappy and Peggy was not well. Ultimately, Landon took the brunt of her unhealthy behaviour. Their own home became the site of numerous suicide attempts by Peggy, many of which Landon witnessed firsthand. One of his mother's suicide attempts particularly stood out in Landon's memory. The family was at the beach. After an argument, Landon's mum left, walked towards the sea. As Landon tried to control the situation, he looked outside the window and saw his mother. He realised she was going deeper and deeper into the water and rushed after her, pulling her back to safety. Landon didn't even know how to swim at that point. His childhood experiences had made him decide early on that he would never follow in his parents' footsteps as an adult and live differently. His beginnings were full of tough moments. His pain radiated beyond his mother's suicidal bouts. At least once she pointed a knife at her son, who would save her very life. Michael Landon faced major stress on a constant basis from her bullying. Landon spent a lot of time by himself. He retreated more and more into his solitary world. He'd often fantasize about building an identity for himself, away from his current reality. Later in his life, in the 1950s, he faced immense disappointment when his dad tried to get him a gig in Los Angeles through his connections at RKO Radio Pictures. It was an embarrassing moment for the father-son duo, as Landon's dad couldn't even get onto the property because of a steadfast security guard. Landon decided at that point to make sure that he was independent. "No matter what I did," he said, "I wasn't going to owe anybody a favour." Despite encountering several obstacles early in his life, Michael Landon was undoubtedly talented and discovered that quickly. He was an excellent javelin thrower. His low grades didn't stop him from excelling, and he scored an athletic scholarship from the University of Southern California after graduating from high school. That year he graduated to the bottom of his class, but with a genius IQ. He was at the university for a year, during which he worked on his skills and also supported himself by holding down odd jobs. Landon was determined and had always been fascinated by acting. While harbouring dreams of competing in the Olympics, he also decided to be a part of his university's speech and drama department. Unfortunately, more bullying followed at the university, and Landon sustained a serious injury on the field. Unable to cope as his athletic performance suffered, he decided to take a break and rebuild. He continued to make a living through odd jobs and focused on getting by, even working as a babysitter at one point, and eventually working in a soup factory, followed by a ribbon factory. He was determined to excel, no matter what he was doing. While it's true that Michael Landon enjoyed acting, he didn't plan on pursuing it professionally. Then, in a single act, his life would change forever. A friend from his warehouse job, an aspiring actor, asked the struggling Landon to help him with an acting school audition by playing opposite him in a scene. Acting was in Landon's blood. When they arrived at the audition, he got in, and his friend didn't. At that point, college dropout Eugene Orowitz transformed into actor Michael Landon. He was happy to help and found himself enjoying the acting process. He still needed to make ends meet and decided to take a job at a gas station near the Warner Brothers studios. He hoped that being close to the studio would help him in terms of networking. It did. He was spotted by an executive who motivated him to sign up for acting classes. He wasn't an overnight success, though, and worked hard to get parts, auditioning whenever he could and doing small roles until he got his first real break. After appearing in a few small roles in television westerns and drama series, Landon was cast in the 1957 film I Was a Teenage Werewolf, which quickly became a hit and to this day is a cult classic. A year prior to landing this role, Landon had met and married widowed legal secretary Dodie Levy-Fraser. He adopted her child, Mark, and the couple had a son, Josh, in 1960. Landon began getting small roles, but still not enough to support a family, and now his handsome boy image was in jeopardy, as his long wavy locks began to turn prematurely grey. In 1959, Landon's career took yet another fortuitous turn. Landon's fame began in earnest with Bonanza and continued to explode through Little House on the Prairie. But for all the reverence he received, he also endured insecurities on set. With both programs, he would use subtle ways to address those points of discomfort. Aged 22 at the start, he was Little Joe for a long time on screen, 14 years to be precise, and he was loved for his portrayal of the ideal son in a ranch-like setting in Nevada. For instance, on Bonanza, all of his castmates in the Cartwright Quartet stood at over 6 feet tall. Landon, meanwhile, was 5'9". That's why on there and Little House he wore heeled boots or platform shoes. Later, as Pa Ingalls, he would be careful to stand on stairs, always a step above others, to conceal his height. It really took off after NBC started showcasing it to audiences over the weekends, and by 1964 it was ruling viewers' hearts. The show enjoyed a loyal fan following and maintained its popularity for years until it concluded in 1973. Without a doubt, Bonanza made Landon a force to be reckoned with, paved the way for his robust acting career, and helped him find his niche and identity in the cutthroat entertainment industry. While Michael Landon was busy working on his career and trying to make a name for himself as an actor, he suffered a major setback in 1959. He was shaken by his father's unexpected passing and mourned his loss. He also started to believe that his fate would be similar, that he'd go early because of a heart attack. He tried to grieve and make sense of his loss in his own way. Later in his career, he wished to take control and oversee his work, an aspect of his personality that irritated many co-workers. When Landon turned to directing a few episodes of Bonanza and even writing them, he was his own worst critic and believed that some of the episodes weren't as good as what they'd already done. Additionally, because he was always chasing perfection, he ended up having a few disagreements with those he worked with. Landon developed very quickly as a good director. Then, as an actor, he began to criticize what he thought were errors being made by other Bonanza directors. It was the same with Mike Landon, the writer. He challenged nearly every line, every scene, every setup in other writers' scripts. It got increasingly bitter toward the end. Landon was labelled as arrogant and stubborn at times, but he said that he didn't want to blame others for his mistakes and would rather take responsibility in case an episode didn't work as expected. Unfortunately for Michael Landon, his personal life, particularly in terms of romance, wasn't perfect. He was married 3 times as he navigated rocky relationships. Landon was often depicted as a family man on one of his most popular shows, but his reality was different. He would himself have a rocky family life for various reasons. In total, he was married 3 times, and across those 3 marriages had 9 children. Ultimately, though, he did show a lot of compassion for his family members, which came to him in various ways, not always biologically. For example, he established a blended family that included biological and adopted children. His marriage to Dodie was falling apart. Early in 1960, Landon began secretly seeing divorced model and actress Lynn No. Michael and Dodie divorced in December 1962. In January 1963, Landon and Lynn eloped in a hasty justice of the peace wedding in Mexico. By 1980, Landon's star was shining bright. The series was at its peak, but in his personal life, his 19-year marriage to Lynn had been deteriorating for quite some time. When Bonanza ended, Landon ended up working heavily on Little House on the Prairie. There, he met and had an affair with makeup artist Cindy Clerico. This affair, coupled with loss through Landon's life, prompted him to break up with Marjorie completely. His children were crushed. In 1983, right on Valentine's Day, Landon married Clerico. His image became tarnished to the point that he lost advertising endorsements, and some executives at NBC even questioned whether or not he could continue to play such an upstanding family man as Charles Ingalls, given this scandal. Landon responded to the outrage. The relationship lasted 19 years. I don't consider that a failed marriage. I don't think it was a disaster. We produced some terrific kids. We just didn't grow in the same direction. We became different people. We both changed. Lynn and I fought a lot about jealousy, about my being tied up with my work. I'd go into depressed moods and then I'd go around screaming at people at home and in the studio. Nobody's perfect. Not Charles Ingalls. Not Michael Landon. None of this is to completely paint Michael Landon as a secret villain. Neither was he a saint. He had his faults and had wonderful qualities that made a lot of people stubbornly love him. Landon's greatest battle was yet to come. His downhill battle with cancer began in April 1991 with intense headaches. Days later he learned he had an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer, and it was terminal. Landon poured his heart out, navigating much of the same trials and tribulations we've explored here. He also opened up about what a struggle it had become to simply live. In the end, though, Landon simply asked that fans pray for him, in exchange for his promise to keep fighting with all he had. Later that summer, little Joe Cartwright, Pa, passed away. He was only 54. Today he is immortalised with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Landon's hometown of Collingswood bears a plaque known as the Little Tree House on the Prairie in his honour, and those who remain who knew Landon remembered someone who always found time to be a father figure, even through all his life's drama. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Michael Landon? Michael Landon left behind a legacy in a body of work that pays tribute to the American spirit, the strength of family, a solid work ethic, and the infectious joy found in optimism and laughter.